I'm going to turn it over to Rodolfo Velesi. This is somebody that I engaged when I was in Ohio. For me, we met in a conference room, and we realized that we were going to have a contest to determine who was more impatient, me or him. I will say I think he's won. I have found my match, and it's him. But one of the things that I like about it, our relationship is a number of things, and it's first a commitment to thinking about how to create conditions for innovation, and that's important. How do we create the conditions for innovation to emerge, and also a keen attention to the way the landscape is changing, and an understanding that talent emerges from the most unlikely of spaces. So you don't want to always go to the same well. And one of the reasons I think he's present here, we do have the Center for Entrepreneurship, but it might not have been a well that they would come to. And just from the short conversations he's had with a number of the students, he's already energized by the possibilities of the relationship moving forward. So I'm thankful for your presence, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Miguel. But I am definitely more patient than you are, okay? So we met about 3.5 years ago, back in Columbus, and it was about the same time we started, Flavia and I started eCove Capital. Some months later, John joined us, and we developed a system that we call Startup Nursery. So we found all the companies that were involved. So we're founders of every company. We very seldom consider making investments. And when we consider making investments in companies that are already being formed, is because we already know that we can spin out companies from that relationship that already exists, or that the company already exists, and create a brand new business. So our business model, it's a business model that goes to the source of innovation. And we consider universities the most abundant source of innovation in the country. And unhappily, just a small percentage of that innovation you're ever going to see in your household, you're ever going to see in the marketplace. Because most of the innovation is funded through grants, through corporate partnerships, and once the grant runs out, the researcher moves on. And that research stays at the university, and very seldom is transferred to a private business, or even to the DoD or some other entity that can use the innovation and either commercialize that innovation or disrupt the product they are trying to disrupt. And we have identified that not only we need to vet technology early on, we need to find the people who will help us drive those technologies into the marketplace. So this is the reason eCove and San Francisco College are partnering initially through the entrepreneurship program to identify and also help model the business leaders, not of the future, but of today. We have, of course, opportunities for internships or even career at eCove and its portfolio companies, but mostly by talking to 6 or 7 students who came talk to me before the presentation, before this, about 15 minutes ago, I was very, like using Miguel's words, very energized. I didn't expect to see that drive already here. And I'm very happy to open up opportunity for most of you who have ideas or have questions, and after Ian's presentation, to come to us and kind of give us a little bit of maybe a little pitch, or maybe just a handshake and a little talk about what you guys are doing. And So we focus a lot on the academic world, identifying technologies. We pull the technologies out of the labs. We usually keep on sponsoring technologies through sponsored programs or direct funding. But eventually those companies grow. Those companies need something else that we can't provide. So we have to launch the companies out of the nursery, and usually that comes with the help of more sophisticated investors and more sophisticated partners. One of our biggest partners is Monte Carlo Capital, founded and run by Ian Soso. And he has made investments and he has participated in very strict due diligence processes and decided to invest anyway. So it seems like we are doing something right. So the idea is to show what Ian does at that later stage, even though he focused on angel capital, angel investment, he's well connected with the rounds that any startup will need to pursue in order to achieve the more, either a more mature state of revenue generating or potential exit and acquisition by a larger company. So, Ian, it's yours now.
That's good. Thanks. This one works? All right. Hi, everyone. I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks very much for the invitations. I'll talk to you about angel investing at large, what it takes to be a successful business angel investor, and how we can identify amazing businesses by bridging what we call the valley of death. Now, as I take you through some of the steps we are actually taking in our investment process, you will understand why we decided to invest in some of the businesses funded by ICOV. But to get started, a reminder was different cycles, what different steps they are in the funding cycles. Typically start with an entrepreneur having an idea and putting his own money into the business. It always has to start with the entrepreneur putting his own money down. I will never invest in a business where the entrepreneur doesn't believe enough in his business not to put his money down. Then he does what we call bootstrapping. Are you trying to get the business to grow, spending as little money as possible? Then he turns to what we call friends and families, and sometimes we call them friends, families, and fools. People basically give you money because they care for you, not because they want to invest in your business. And then you have the business angels. The business angels are the first professional investors in your business. And as the business grows, you start to tap into the venture capitals, and they invest in what we call Series A, B, and C, and so on, until you sell your business. Now, once, as the business starts to grow, as you start to get business angel money, and as the business starts to need more money, some businesses will need to raise anywhere between $500,000 and $2 or $3 million. Now, typically, this is far too large for business angels to invest in. And venture capital will tell you, come back when you need $5 million. It is a valley of death. It is this area of investments where it's very hard for companies to raise money because it's too big for business angels and too small for VCs. Now, startups around the world are facing exactly the same problem, the valley of death. Now, this represents an opportunity for what we call super angels to find the best companies around the world. And this is where I come in, and I'm going to be explaining to you how I do that. But first of all, let's take a step back. What is a business angel? Typically, it's a high net worth individual, a professional, an ex-entrepreneur, someone who invests his own money, very important, his own money, into seed and early stage companies. He never takes a majority stake in a company. He takes a small stake into a company. And he invests alone or invests as part of an angel network. So there are plenty of angel networks in the US and around the world. Now, 99% of business angels don't do that full time. 99.9% of business angels are people who do other things in life than being business angels. There are different motivations from various angels. For some of them, like me, they're looking for a return. Some of them are street investment professionals. And the reason why they like to invest as business angels is because it is, in my view, the most profitable asset class to invest in. And I'll say a few more words about that later on. In some countries, there are very tax-efficient schemes The UK, for example, has a very well-known scheme called ZIS, which gives an incentive for investors to participate in early-stage companies. For some, it's the need to feel useful. For some former entrepreneurs, is a need to give back to the younger self they were and help younger entrepreneurs be successful. For some business angels, it's just a desire to be remaining up to date with latest trends in technology. For examples, entrepreneurs in certain space may be interested in finding out and keeping up to speed with development in a stage, in an area where themselves they're entrepreneurs, and therefore they be business angel in that particular space. And for some, to be honest, it's just a way to remaining socially active, and I think it's a bit more exciting to talk about the latest startups you're investing in than the real estate markets. Now, many angels are part of angel network. There are thousands of angel networks around the world these days. And there are people with all sort of backgrounds. Most members actually will be entrepreneurs. And most angels invest in their own geography. Most angels will invest in their own city, or I would say in their own regions. And typically for new business angel, joining an angel network is a great way to start because you'll be investing with angel investors who are more experienced and you can learn. Now, super angels are typically larger investors, and they just invest larger amounts than regular business angels. And that takes many forms. Some of them manage very small funds. What I mean by small funds, anywhere between $10 to $40 million, which by fund management standards is very small. Some are very active angel investors, investing their own money. And there are a growing number of very high-profile business angels who typically are cashed-out entrepreneurs from Silicon Valley and increasingly from Europe as well. As far as Monte Carlo Capital is concerned, we invest anywhere between $500,000 and $2 and $3 million in early stage ventures. I'm myself typically as a lead investor. We invested about $20 million last year in early stage ventures, and we invest directly into companies. And we are one of the largest early stage investors in Europe. And as business grow, we bring in later stage investors into our deals, and typically big family offices. Now, how did I become an angel investor? We all have a very different track. For me, I come from the financial industry. I was an investment banker. I worked in London, Paris, Tokyo, Singapore, and Hong Kong. I worked for big investment bank, HSBC, JP Morgan, UBS. And the last job I had, I was running the investment bank of Commerzbank in Asia Pacific out of Hong Kong. Commerzbank is the second largest German bank. And I stopped working in 2009, and I founded Monte Carlo Capital initially to invest my own money. And I chose to invest in early stage businesses just because for me, it is the most profitable asset class. And again, I'll come back to that a bit later. Over time, I grew a network of co-investors and advisors that come from all various parts of the world. And we built Monte Carlo Capital into a super angel groups. And as I mentioned, we're now one of the largest early stage investors in Europe. And we invest our own money. Again, we're not fund managers. We don't manage other people's money. Here are some stats that I think are important to understand. The average angel investor in Europe invests 21,000 euro per company. Okay? The average investment per company for a business angel in Europe is about network is about 185,000 euros. So a group of angel investors coming together invest about 185,000 euros per company. In the US, it's nearly twice that amount, so about $350,000 per investment per a company. And in Europe, the average investment for a network per year is about 1.3 million euros. And there's about 500 business angel networks in Europe currently. So keeping this in mind, how do business angels compare to the venture world? Well, venture capitalists, they invest other people's money, they run a fund, they charge management fees, they charge performance fees, and they invest bigger tickets. The angel investors, again, they invest their own money, is smaller size tickets. The average group in Europe invests about 185,000 euros. And the VCs, venture capitalists, typically, they're not going to invest unless they can deploy at least $2 to $5 million per company. So if you are a company and you're looking to raise $1 million because this is what you need, on Europe, on average, you would have to convince 40 business angels to invest in your company. And this is very difficult. The VCs would tell you, well, come back when you need $10 million, because quite frankly, we have no time to live with $1 million. Now, there are various definitions of the value of death in the startups industry. Some say it's the entire period before a company breaks even. I tend to define it as this difference between what is available from business angel, which in Europe is 184,000 euros, and what the VCs can deploy. 1 million investment would typically require for the angels. So anywhere between $500,000 and $2 million is what I define as the value of death. It's very hard for companies to raise money. And this is typically our investment size, and this is typically my focus. It's a great stage to invest because the business angels have come in, their friends and family have come in, the business is starting to grow, the business has been de-risked to some degree, they are exciting businesses, and they can't find any money. So for me, it's a great place to invest. Now, I've done a bit of research on what is a track record of business angels. I mean, I'm spending my own money in there. My friends are investing with me. Is it really a worthwhile investments? And there are very few studies being made. I mean, there are private investors that don't necessarily share their data with everybody else. Now, I found about 4 studies that were made, and the 4 studies tend to show very similar results. The median IRR in the UK and in the US in those studies range from 18% per annum and 54% per annum, which, by the way, is very high. Now, those returns are achieved typically within 3 and 5 years. And what's also interesting is that the failure rate of the angels, i.e. losing all your money, is actually lower than VCs, which is quite counterintuitive. Now, a few things to keep in mind. The best way to increase your odds of success is by building a diversified portfolio. I tend to say that you need at least to have 10 investments to start to be able to reach this average median IRR that business angel can achieve. Unfortunately, many business angels lose money. And the reason, I think there are many reasons. The first is that when people start, they don't have the experience, they're casual investors. I started by doing everything wrong, and I started by doing things most people start when they invest. You have a few friends, they send you an email, you look at this exciting opportunity, you have no idea what it's doing, you assume your friend has done his homework, he hasn't, you send a check, and you never see your money again. So this is the way I started, and this is the way most business angels actually started. And it tends to put a lot of people off, I can imagine, because when you start to lose your money once or twice or 3 times, you're starting to think that maybe you're not doing something right. And some angels also don't make any money because they only invest in 4 or 5 deals, and it's just not enough. So you have what we call a J-curve. You have this time that you need to spend making your homework, investing, and it's something that is a challenge for many people when they start. There's a very interesting research, the most interesting research in my view in the early stage investment world was done by the Kaufman Foundation. It's the biggest foundation in the US focusing on entrepreneurships. And they did an analysis over 17 years between 1990 and 2007 on quite a large number of angels, not professional investors, but people who are reasonably seasoned investors. And here's some of the findings that they have. The median IRR over 17 years for those angels were 27%. 61% of the investors return more than 1 times their investments, and 7% of the investment make more than 10 times their money. Now, here's the thing to remember. They looked at what are the drivers of return, what are the most important things that made business angels successful versus those that didn't. The single most important driver of return is due diligence. And I will tell you, due diligence is the single most important thing you can do in any investments you would ever do in your life, whether you're buying your flat, whether you're buying a car, whether you're investing in the stock exchange. Due diligence is what makes the difference between return and no return. In this study, those that did more than 40 hours of due diligence had a median return on investment of 5.9 times their money. Nearly 6 times their money for those that did a lot of due diligence. Those that did a low amount of due diligence get 1.1 times their money back. High level of due diligence, 6 times your money. Low amount of due diligence, you're just getting your money back. The other areas looked at was the experience you have in the industry. The greater the expertise you have in the industry, the greater your return you're having. And the other elements they looked at is the level of participation. The more you're involved in the business you're investing in, you higher the returns. Having said all that, the single most important driver of return is due diligence. It's far more important than knowing the industry. Now, there's one element that wasn't measured, and I think is extremely important, is the deal flow. Clearly, the more deal you see, the higher the quality, the more you're going to have a chance to find a great investment. I do spend a lot of time working on my deal flow. I see about 1,000 business plans per annum. I would call qualified business plans. Business plan coming from people I know. I can find 100,000 on the internet and websites. But I would say 1,000 people from business plan from people who say, hey, Ian, we know each other. I've done some more homework. I think you should look at it. Now, I tend to find that the business plans that I invest in, I don't find in business plan competition. I don't find in associations. I don't find through business angel networks. I tend to find some people I know, I rely on, and introduce me to somebody else. So the relationship side is very critical. And the way I do that, in a sense, is building a reputation. There are so many businesses being created around the world. What matters to me is being found by the best businesses. And the way I do that is by building the reputation as the investor the big businesses want to have on their cap tables. Now, what I think is the most important for the best companies is two things. A is the ability to invest, which is important, and B is the ability to help the company succeed. And I explain to you basically how I do that. So I do spend a lot of time working on deal flows. So how do I do that? On one hand, I'm part of associations. So I'm part of IBAN, which is a business angel network in Europe. It has 50 countries, part of IBAN. I won last year the best performing member out of those 50 countries. I coach startups at European Commissions. They have the massive grant program in Europe. I coach there. I'm a judge at business plan competition on the board of the Venture Capital Association in Monaco. So that's one thing. The other thing is SPR conferences. SPR conferences around the world. A couple of months ago, I was speaking at the third largest tech conference in the world in Dubai. Next week, I'm back in Monte Carlo. I'm giving a talk at the Venture Capital teaching. In 3 weeks, I'm in Istanbul at the World Gathering of Business Angel, where I'm giving a talk. I was in Russia over the summer, talking at the biggest business school in Russia. I do that all the time. And then I teach. I'm a lecturer. I'm a professor of venture capital at the university in Monaco. I teach MBA students, master students. I was teaching in France over the summer. I was also teaching in Russia. So all these things are absolutely critical to build a reputation from being the investors, the best companies we want to have. And obviously, other people are important to be able to bring me deals. I have advisors in Monte Carlo Capital. These are professionals that are based in different parts of the world. Other leading angel investors, incubators, other co-investors, board members of some of our portfolio companies, CEO of some of our portfolio companies who come to me and say, hey, Ian, you should be that guy because he's setting up a great business. Let me give you two examples. First one is Flavio, one of the co-founders of ECOV. We met because the gentleman who recommended you for Harvard Business School is based in Monaco, and he told Flavio, hey, you should meet up here next time you're in Monaco. We met up, we spent a lot of time together, ended up coming to the States and doing a due diligence on his businesses. So once you have these 1,000 qualified deals that come to you, next question, how do you find the 5 that you want to invest in? So we have a very strict filtering system. The first thing is I'm looking for businesses or products that are unique. I'm looking for things that are unique in the world, something that solves a problem. I don't invest in Me Too businesses. Somebody who says, 5 other guys are making money around the corner, I want to be number 6, I'm just not interested. I'm looking for something that is disrupting a business. I like to see a proof of concept being made. So typically something that works, ideally initial sales. In life sciences, when I invest in biotech, I want to get a comfort that we're going to get some successful clinical data. I didn't say I prefer painkillers to vitamins. I like to invest in businesses that solve problems. Many businesses, it's never been easier to set up a business. It's never been cheaper. It's never been more fashionable to set up a business. So you have a lot of businesses that typically are not going to survive and don't make much sense. If you ever start a business, look to solve a problem. A lot of businesses are being created these days not solving problems. So people think they have an idea, they put a business together, and really nobody wants it because only the person who's founding it thinks it's actually interesting. I prefer deep technology. So that's why I invest in businesses that have very strong intellectual property. So typically ECOV gets involved in what we call deep technologies, very strong intellectual property, business that's really solve a problem. If I'm investing in a business that is competitive, I'm looking for the smart guy in the room. I'm looking for the guy who is going to change an industry. Okay. Now, we invest globally, which is very unusual for business angels and venture. So we invest a lot in the US and we invest a lot in Europe. Last year, out of the 6 new investments we made, 5 were in the US, including 4 with ECOV, and 1 was in the UK. So what are we looking for? The team. The team is absolutely critical. The entrepreneur can be a tech expert, like a Bill Gates. It could be a great salesman, like a Richard Branson. It could be a user experience guru, like a Steve Jobs. It could be a finance guy, like a Bloomberg. Ideally, you have a tech guy and a sales guy. It's always better, ideally, to have at least 2 people together. One person needs to be the clear entrepreneur. They need to be a clear leader. I think a previous experience is a plus. There's no correlation between past failure and future success. It's not because you fail as an entrepreneur the first time that you're going to fail the second time. But going through the motion of being an entrepreneur brings so much value that the second time around, even if you fail the first time, you have a much higher chance of being successful. However, there are many great first-time entrepreneurs. Gates, Zuckerberg, Steve Jobs, all these guys are first-time entrepreneurs. Now, the second element is there typically is a lot of debate between the jockey and the horse. Are you investing more in the team? Are you more investing in the horse, which is the technology? Or are you looking into the market? To be honest, a lot of people are saying they want the jockey. For me, I want the jockey, the horse, and the markets. If there's a great entrepreneur and the technology doesn't make any sense, what's the point? Is you have a great entrepreneur, but the market is not big enough, what the point? So I'm looking for a great jockey, somebody is a great entrepreneur, a great horse, which is a great technology, and a great market. The size of the opportunity. Every time we invest, we're looking at 20 times our money on investments. Now, it doesn't mean we're going to succeed every time, but because this is the riskiest asset class, we need to ensure that every time we invest, we're looking for a very significant return to compensate for the fact that once in a while, we're going to get it wrong and we're going to lose all our money. And it's very important to build a portfolio, as I was saying earlier. We're also looking for a clear exit strategy. We're looking at 3 to 5 years to exit. It's very important to have a clear exit strategy when we invest because typically things don't go according to plan. Typically things get delayed. And I don't want 3 to 5 years to end up being 10 years. So an entrepreneur says, well, I start and see how it goes. I'm just not interested. I want to have a clear plan the day we invest, that there's going to be an exit, and I want to know when the exit is going to be, keeping in mind that there are delays. The price is important. Clearly, you want to make a return on investment, so the level you're getting in matters. And I'm looking at valuation that can range from anywhere between $1 and $20 million, depending on the stage of developments and so on. So once I apply this first level of filter, 95% of the companies already drop out. So once you've chosen the 50 companies that you're very interested in, I do what we call a deep dive due diligence. This is when you're starting basically to go and bother everyone, asking all sorts of questions all day, and trying to get an answer out of that. Now, there are, I would say, 2 parts in the due diligence process. The first part is you really trying to understand the business. What is the theory behind the business? And you'll find that very often the CEOs don't articulate themselves. The CEOs are so much into their business, they're sometimes struggling to take a step back and say, oh, this is why I'm so different. So the first thing you have to do is identify that this business may be really different. And the second thing you need to do is actually being able to identify yourself and articulate, sometimes with the CEO counts, why this thing is exceptional. And what I like to do is actually work with the CEOs to really articulate and take out why this thing is so exceptional. So I'm looking at absolutely everything. You need to look at the competition, you need to look at the contract that was signed, the upside, the financials. And I tend to find in due diligence is that by sitting down with the management and asking all sorts of questions, you get a sense of how thought through the business plan it really is. You're getting so much by sitting with people and asking questions until people are tired of you. That's the first part of the due diligence process. The second part is actually checking that everything you were told is correct, right? Now, and this is where my advisors come in very handy. Clearly, I invest in deep technology. The typically 5 or 10 guys in the world, they understand the technology that we invest in. So I need to be able to reach out to my advisor and say, hey, I'm looking at this, I think it's interesting. What do you think? Now, next stage, valuation. It's really one of the most challenging parts of the early stage investment process. Now, when I teach at university, I go through the various methodologies, and the venture capital method, the comparable public valuation method, the comparable exit valuation method, the DCF method, comparable deal valuation, the scorecard valuations. But when you're very early stage investors, the reality is you hardly have a business to look at, right? So you really don't have much financials. So this is the way I look at valuation. The first thing is the experience of the team. So less the experience, the greater the risk, the less I'm willing to pay. Then I'm looking for very big market opportunities. As I said, I'm looking for 20x every time we invest. We need to take into account that there's going to be dilution along the way, and a lot of companies will experience delay. So I'm looking at the size of the opportunity, clearly. The larger the opportunity is, the larger somehow, the more you're somehow willing to pay. I'm looking at how much money will need to be raised before the exit. The more money to be raised, the higher the dilution you have as an investor, but also the higher the risk, because financing is a risk, right? You never know whether you're going to be able to raise the next round of money. I'm looking at exit comparables. I'm looking to get a sense of how much the business I'm investing in could be worth. And clearly, depending on the industry you're investing in, those comparables will be very different. The solidity of the business plan. The clearer the plan, the lesser the unknown, the lesser the risk, the more I'm willing to pay. But having said that, I never invest unless I see a very solid business plan. I do pay a lot of attention to the cash flows and the forecast. The cash flow, the financial modeling, is a reflection of all the assumptions a management team will be making. So you can be reading a 30-page presentations. That, to be honest, we're going to have a lot of blurb. When you sit down with the CEO of a company and you look at the financial plan is made and you question every single assumptions, you will really understand what he has in mind and how much work is done on this planning. Then we look at, what is the absolute number we're paying. Typically, I don't want to pay too much. In terms of valuation, the lower the price, the greater the returns, obviously. I'm looking at how much money has been spent so far. Ideally, I don't want to pay too much over what has been spent so far in the business. Clearly, the later the stage of the business, the more of a premium willing to pay. We're always willing to leave some money on the table, clearly for the early stage investor to compensate for the risks. And the more milestones are being reached, the higher the valuation. So typically, we're looking at 1 or 2 million valuation for very early stage business. For a business that is a lot bigger, we're willing to go up to 2 million valuations. Then there's a deal structuring. So due diligence has been made, then you need to structure the deal. So typically, I'm the lead investor, which means that I'm the one who will be negotiating the term and structuring the deal. And there are different types of security you can invest in. Common stock, I would say this is the most common security when you're doing early stage investors. Preference shares are a bit less used in Europe than in the US. Typically, we want usual rights and warranties, tag-along, drag-along warranties is all sort of standard that you want to have in the documentation you have when you're investing. Typically, I'm looking for a board rights. Sometimes I join the board myself, but increasingly, I appoint someone else to join the board. We sometimes invest through convertibles. And one thing to remember is never to invest through a convertible unless there's a cap on the valuations. And we sometimes invest through preference shares. I'm of two minds for preference shares. Investors like preference shares because they do provide more protections. If you're very early stage investors and you're investing through preference shares, I think it could be a double-edged sword because if you have VCs coming later on, they may use that actually against you. And then we are closing our investments. So typically I'm the lead, I'm putting my own money down, and I have co-investors, high net worth individuals, family offices, are co-investing with me directly in the company. So then once you invested, the hard work really starts. And this is helping the business becoming successful. So we're very active investors. And every time you invest, there are always gaps into businesses. And I think my job as an investor is to bring advisors and to help fill these gaps as much as possible. And we do that in all sorts of ways. We have that with a corporate strategy, with funding. Occasionally I brought in a CFO, a CEO. I'm currently in discussion to bring the chairman of a biotech companies. We found manufacturers in China. We're introducing clients, we're introducing partners. We're working with the companies all the way to the exits. So in the end, what we want to do is help our businesses succeed because it basically helps our own investments. And then we're working all the way to the exit. The most likely exit scenario is an M&A. Most companies sell via M&A, not IPOs. And actually, it's increasing the case for the last 10 years that M&A are a lot more popular than IPOs. And it's very important to understand your exit potential when you invest. There are different type of prices or that are paid for acquisitions. The cheapest acquisition, what we call an acqui-hire, is a company buying a team. A company buying a team is the cheapest acquisition you're going to get. The next level is a technology buy. It's a company acquiring a technology. The next level of acquisition is a business acquisition. It's a company buying another going concern. The holy grail is a strategic buy. It is the company is saying, I don't care the price, I need to buy you because otherwise somebody else is going to buy you, or otherwise you're the one who's going to basically kill my business. And when you're an investor, when you're CEO of a company, you always need to keep in mind how to move up the curve as much as possible towards what ideally is a strategic acquisitions. So how do we invest? I mean, in the end, for me, being an investor means I need to build a very strong deal flow, and I do spend a lot of time on that. My focus is bridging the funding Death Valley because it is a sweet spot that is a global sweet spot for investors. I do a lot of due diligence when I invest, and then I'm bringing in various advisors into my businesses. We have co-investors that come from around the world. We invest globally, and we're helping our companies all the way to the exits. So having said that, now you probably understand, if you know some of the companies that basically for me tick all the boxes that we were looking for. I just want to leave you with two thoughts. The first thing is that it is an asset class that you can only do if you do well. So if you invest in the S&P and you invest randomly, the reality is you will be doing alone randomly about as well as an average fund manager that, by the way, you're going to pay, right? The star fund manager are going to outperform the S&P by 1% per annum. The very mediocre fund manager probably will underperform by 2%. So the difference between a star manager and the lousy manager is 3% per annum. The difference between a very good early stage investor and a poor one is the difference between someone who's going to make a lot of money and someone who's going to lose all his money. So it's an asset class that you're condemned to do very well. And keep in mind, most early stage investors are not really spending enough time typically to do that. So the marginal benefits of doing your homework is significant. The other thing is, we're living in a world that is changing very fast. The conservative investor will typically invest in a diversified basket of stocks that are blue chips. So think about your oil and gas, your cars, your banks, your insurance companies. But is that really the safe investment? If you think about it, oil and gas, banks, insurance, cars, these are all businesses that are likely to be disrupted by the startups we want to invest in. So is it safer to invest in big global stocks, or is it safer to invest in these early stage companies that are going to be tomorrow in the S&P? So thank you very much. I mean, the VC returns are quite are public. Public. You can find the information on venture. You tend to find that the venture returns in the US are probably a bit higher than in Europe. But also you find in the US that the returns on venture is very skewed. So a few venture firms tend to get the bulk of the returns, while other firms are more struggling. Angel investing is very hard to find the information just because, again, people are private investors and they don't need to share the information with anybody else. So the studies that I found were 4 main studies that were done on the long term. They tend to show that business angel, when they're doing their work properly, have quite substantial returns. So if you're looking at the Kaplan Foundation report, which is done about, I think, about 600 angels over 17 years and about 1,000 exits, they look at 27% IRR. But if you keep in mind that some of those angels do a lot of work, and these are the angels that had their median return investment nearly 6 times, and some don't do much work and they barely get their money back, you can see that those that really are very active and do their homework properly are really getting very substantial ROI that I think in the venture world, typically you're going to be struggling to get. It's really worth looking at the Carbon Foundation report. It's just online. It's really worth looking at it because I think it's probably the most comprehensive study there is. And they look at the performance of business angels. And they also have a very comprehensive study on venture capital and the performance. And they actually be critical about the venture world. And they've been investing themselves as a foundation for a long time in the venture world. I tend to, my philosophy is that I see a lot of conflict of interest in the financial industry at large and in the venture world like everywhere else. And I always sometimes don't feel that the venture money is always completely aligned with A, their investors, and B, with the companies they're investing in. So I like to build my own business as a group of private investors because we all are experienced in our own fields, and when we're investing, our interests are significantly more aligned with that of the founders. I mean, if tomorrow a company we're investing and say, hey, actually, we think we can take this business much further. Let's keep it for another 5 years because this is going to be very big. A venture firm says, sorry, but I need to get out of my investors need the liquidity, and my venture fund is reaching its limits. I need to liquidate my investments. First guy who wants to buy the business, we sell it to them, right? So there's the interest between the venture fund and the entrepreneurs are not always completely aligned as well. So as much as possible, we are trying to keep just private investors in all our businesses. Yeah. We're taking more risk as business angels than any venture capitalist will ever do. If you're a VC, you would typically invest 1 to 5. So if you're a VC, you invest, you're charging 2% per annum management fee. All sort of fees that sometimes are hidden somewhere in the prospectus, and you're taking 20% of the upside. So, and typically you're going to commit 1 to 5% of the money being committed to a fund. So you're committing 1 to 5% of the capital investing in a fund, and you charge 2% per annum. So your risk, I tell you, is nothing. You're not taking any risk. So we're taking far more risk than any VC will ever take because it's our own money. That's the first thing. The second thing is there's no leverage in our industry. I mean, no bank, no one will ever lend you any money to invest in early stage investments. Just, we don't have leverage. So if you're a private equity fund, by the way, venture and business angels are part of what we call private equity at large. But the reality is the job, the activity is completely different. We invest in things differently. We look at businesses differently. We invest at a different stage. It's a very different activity. So private equity, which basically involves buying out a business in most instances and very, very often putting on leverage, is a different activity. But it's different size tickets, different stage of businesses, different type of businesses, it's different activity. So we never take leverage. Does that answer your question? Yeah. But I tell you, when you're investing your money as opposed to other people's money, don't think you're taking less risk, you're taking more risk. Yeah.
So we have another question over here. Student.
And by the way, I have nothing against VCs. I mean, it's just all the same industry working together. And typically they come at a later stage. And in many businesses we're taking in VCs. But if you have the choice, if you have the luxury of having a choice as a business, you'll find the VCs are really making a difference to your business, if possible. And there's some great VCs out there. I mean, there are some amazing VCs out there. Don't get me wrong, right?
Hi.
As I said, I think earlier, when I started, I did everything wrong. And that's the way most people start. So, typically I got friends. In my case, I had a friend. We know each other since we're basically students, been very successful as an investor. And he said, why don't you try investing in early stage companies? And I was running, as an investment banker, I was running liquid side of the investment space. And I said, well, I'm going to give it a shot. I just follow what you're doing. And very quickly I realized that he wasn't doing much work himself in the businesses. And I lost my money. So it put a bit of a damper on my excitement to invest in early stage businesses. But I always felt that that was an area I was interested in. So I tried again later. And but this time I was running my own deals. I was making my homework myself. And basically I always made money when I was making my homework. In terms of understanding the business, I tell you, when I start looking at a business, I think in most businesses I invest in, particularly the deep technology businesses, there are 5 guys in the world that really understand the technology. So I always think that as an investor, I don't need to have to be able to write a thesis on the business I'm investing in, because in reality, I wouldn't be able to. But I need to understand the business itself, what it's trying to do, and I'm investing in people's ability to deliver in a business. So I need to get very comfortable that the business itself has the right people inside to deliver in the plan. Right? And that's a challenge. So if you invest in an industry you know very well, your chances of success are higher because you really understand it. But business and technology are evolving so fast that the ability really to say, always invest in a business I know well, I think is just an illusion. The reality, even if you're a biotech expert, even if you're an expert in IoT or in AI, things are moving so fast that you're not going to remain an expert very long. It's very important to diversify. So if you're only investing in a space you know inside out, you're going to end up investing in very, very few companies. You're going to be over-concentrated. You're not going to be diversified. And 5 years down the line, the sector is going to evolve so much that you're probably going to be out of depth. So the way I look at it is that I'm investing in both tech and life sciences, biotech, which, by the way, not many angel investors do. And I'm looking for businesses that are really doing something different, but I'm looking for peoples and teams that really are able to deliver. And it's very challenging. I mean, it's always a question I'm asking myself. The first time I look at a business, you have to be able to say, well, this is very interesting, even though you may not understand the technology. So you need to be able to identify the fact that it's an interesting technology. And after that, you need to spend time getting your head around it. And it's hard work. And sometimes, sometimes it's just beyond me, and I just don't get involved. Typically, as a business angel, we come in an earlier stage. So typically, it's founders' money, friends and family, business angels. As the business grow, they look for VCs. This is really the standard. The fact that we're just financing everything ourselves as a group, I would say, is pretty unusual. It's quite unique. But the typical route is really you start with business angels and then you go with VCs. The thing to be keeping in mind always with any investor you have, I mean, if you have no choice, just take the money. Doesn't matter where it's coming from. I would say, in terms of whether it's business angel or a VC, somebody's financing your business is great. If you have the luxury of choice, find your investor very carefully. Make sure that there are people who can help you. Because in the end, you're a small business, you're growing very fast. You need all the help you can get. And whether it's a business angel or whether it's VC, if you can get people really bringing value, it will make a difference. I mean, that probably the greatest VC in the world right now is Horowitz. It's Andreessen Horowitz. They're just maybe 10 years old, and they completely changed the way VCs are doing. They go about doing their business. They actually want to be A, transparent, which was new in the VC world, and B, they actually creating entire teams that help their businesses succeed. If I had to go and look for one VC, that would be the first door I would knock out. And actually, at our own stage, which is much earlier, we have very similar approaches. We are money, but we're also here to help the businesses, because their view is that if they're seen as just being as money and as very helpful money, the best companies will go to them, which makes complete sense. And I think very quickly they became the number one VC around just because of that. Yeah.
And good afternoon. I'm John Dilliard from the management department here. Thank you very much for a very informative talk this afternoon. My question is, students here, there's no shortage of good ideas among our students here, and some of these ideas may be possibly game-changing. However, there's going to be a shortage of funds, personal funds, funds from friends and family and fools. And what advice would you give to these students who think, I have a really good idea, I want to move this further, but I don't know what to do from this point on?
Sure. Say that, should I?
Well, first of all, talk to people, right? Talk to your friends or talk to someone who has done something in the industry. I think the school can provide you access to the alumni. I think there are a lot of alumni who are very successful in their areas, and I think the first step in kind of vetting that idea would be to go through an informal talk with someone who knows more, some advisor. And I don't know if the Alumni Association here is organized in a way where that you can reach out to the alum, with a specific question, almost like a blog or online Q&A thing. That would be my first suggestion to any university. But St. Francis, you see a lot of very successful St. Francis alumni who are still here in Manhattan or here in New York. Or I understand. Sorry, I tried to correct it before you corrected me. I said New York after the Brooklyn. Okay, yeah. I was here on Saturday, and I remember the city the borough manager. He was very adamant about Brooklyn. Yeah, the president. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, he was. Brooklyn is the center of the universe. I forgot about that. So once you have access to an advisory layer, then you can start talking to companies like ours. We not necessarily that we're going to make an investment in your idea, but personally, I am very interested in helping anything that can come out of St. Francis. And I would love to see a St. Francis founded entity that is going to not necessarily be the next Google. It doesn't need to be, but that will be part of enabling a new technology or a new idea, a new concept, new service to reach out to market.
So I think that's it. Can we please give these gentlemen a great big round of applause, maybe even a standing ovation?